trips I've met some very, very inspirational characters and people. One sticks out. Happy about the hooch, who come in a mankini, which didn't really leave much to the imagination. It was a charity event, and I think we almost nearly got nicked that day. Like old times. But the last speaker, happy about the hooch, Michael. Mate, you're another one who's a massive inspiration to me. If I've been struggling and whatnot, I use Instagram, like I said, as a tool, and I'll go and look at your page or look at your stories, and you're always there to make people laugh, but you keep it real as well. You say how you're feeling on the good days and the bad, and I think a lot of people need to hear that. You're not just someone I follow on Instagram anymore, you're my mate, you know, and I'm very lucky to have met you. I know Jack feels the same, I know other people do. So, Michael, everyone.
I think, first of all, I've got to establish something really important. When's the buffet spread coming out?
It's next.
Is it waiting for me to finish? I'm going to keep this really short though, because I'm hoping there's some vol au vents. Sausage roll. I've just been thinking about it all week. I have no idea how we ended up connecting. I know it was via Instagram, and that was on the first time we met face to face was your first anniversary of sobriety, which was around about my birthday. It was March, wasn't it? Or February. I can't remember.
I don't know.
No, the sea was very cold.
Yeah.
And a bit about myself. I've been a big drinker all my life. Well, not all my life. The first 17 years, didn't touch the stuff. My dad doesn't drink, strangely, and I just thought that was normal. So, you know, because people don't drink. I hadn't appreciated that other kids, like their dads, were coming home from the pub sort of late every night. So my dad was always around. I can't blame him. On my mum's side, the family was just alcoholism goes through the generations. My mum was Scottish, where she was born in India and grew up there. Because the mill in Scotland where my granddad worked had closed down in Scotland, and they opened one up in India. So they said, would you like to come with us? So did. The family was raised there. And I didn't really know my grandparents because my granddad on mum's side had already died of liver cirrhosis before I was born. And then my nan passed away when I was young. My mum, as a result, she'd grown up in a family that was completely dysfunctional. The early part of her life growing up in India, she'd always had a nanny. When she sang me nursery rhymes, they were in Hindi, because her own parents never used to raise her. They had a nanny for that. And her parents would just buy crates of whiskey whilst the nanny looked after the kids, which was fine until they had to move back to the UK, and all of a sudden they've got to raise the kids on their own. There's no nanny for you in the UK. And this resulted in her just living in a household with two drunk parents, her older sister trying best to raise the other two daughters as mum and dad threw plates at each other. And she moved out of home as soon as possible. I think she went into a field of study, went to sort of university, not because she was passionate about it, but because at the time she could move away from home and get a grant for accommodation if she chose a course that wasn't offered locally. So she decided to become a trilingual secretary. She quite liked languages, I think, and that meant that she could move away from home, and her accommodation was with nuns, and that was better than living at home. So my mum had grown up with alcoholism, just driving cart and horses through her life, and I think it impacted her for the rest of her life. She had two kids. She had married my dad, had two kids, and she suffered from postnatal depression when she had me. She was okay with my brother. I came along, and not as much was known then about postnatal depression. but she never got over it, and she was spent long periods of time in the psychiatric unit in Whalley Mental Hospital near Brentwood, which is now flats. And a lot of my memories of my mum in early childhood was me going to see her at the mental hospital, which I really loved because they had ramps everywhere, which meant I could get my skateboard out. It was just, that's, I remember sort of seeing her there and thinking, never understood why she was there. I liked the ramps, and they made you cups of tea, so it wasn't so bad. And I remember hearing about her, she had electric shock therapy, and that was really cool. Like, when you're 6 or 7 years old, wow, your mum's getting electric shocks. And then I remember when I was 7, and my mum was in just the hospital again, not the mental hospital, but A&E, because she'd put a kitchen knife in her chest. And again, I went in, and I'd heard what had happened. Could not comprehend the consequences of that. All I knew was that my mum is a fucking hero because she has put a knife in her chest and she survived it. It went between the lungs and the heart. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? How brave are you to be able to do that to yourself? And then, when a few weeks later, I came back from school after, I've been at after school club, chess. I'd had my first ever victory at chess. And I was like the top of the world, and I came back, and my brother was just cycling around the garden, and my dad was crying, and my dad had to explain to me that the police had found my mum dead in the car. She had left the hospital and she'd driven and gassed herself with the exhaust fumes. And he told me to make this fun and happy, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought very
But, and within a few weeks of that, her mum, my alcoholic grandmother, passed away, and then a few weeks later than that, my granddad on my dad's side passed away. I lost my mum and the 2 remaining grandparents within 6 months, or just after my 8th birthday. And so I grew up just thinking, I'm not going to drink. That's not, my dad doesn't drink. My dad's always been there for us. He's just been the rock that's held the family together. He doesn't drink. I have no interest. And then I had my first drink at 17. After losing my mum, I'd started going to church. No one else in my family did, but there's a girl opposite who lived opposite. She went every Sunday. And I was struggling, and I thought, you know what might give me some peace if I start going to church and I can get some comfort in my mum's in heaven. It was an evangelical church. And it seems to offer me, I felt like a bit of community at first. As I got a bit older, I started talking about my mum. Unfortunately, though I was told that because she had taken her own life, it's unlikely, unless she'd repented, that she would be in heaven. And then I sort of came out to some friends as gay when I was about 14, and was told, unfortunately, you're probably going to end up the same way. And I just felt that wherever I tried to fit in, I didn't. And when I had my first drink, I just didn't care. It's like I've been trying to go through life hiding because I'm always being picked on and I don't fit in anywhere. I just want to hide, and then all of a sudden I'd have a drink and I don't care what anybody else thinks because I feel good now and I feel confident to be myself. And it was a revelation, and I got a job in the local pub. Well, I applied for universities. I got a place at Cambridge, turned it down. Went to UCL for about 6 months, and I had just one morning I woke up and there was just complete depression, and I didn't get out of bed the whole week other than to wee and drink some water. And I just crashed and I thought, you know what, I can't do this. I'm going to go home. I went home, started working at the pub, drinks after work, because everybody buys you. Well, people buy you a pint. There's normally about 3 pints at the end of each shift. And then the first time I realised that this alcohol might be a problem was 18. I'd only been drinking for a year. And if I wasn't working at the pub, I was going to the pub. It was a small village I lived in. It was the only thing to do. It was like adult youth club, and that's what I think the pub is. This youth club for adults with poison on the side. Excellent. And I hadn't got any money. I'd already spent it because I got drunk, and opposite the pub was a bike shop, and after some day drinking I decided to go to the bike shop, and then I thought I'd spent all my money, which was £250 on a bike. And this panic set in. It's like, I've got no money for the pub tonight. And I was lifting all the cushions and things off the sofas to see whatever change I could find. I lived opposite a shop. I was going down the street picking up any coins I could find. I went into the shop to see if there's any change until I had enough money for a pint. And I just remember thinking then, this isn't good. I mean, is this normal? Like, I am in a real panic because I won't be able to have a beer tonight. And that lasted a good 20 years. Until I was drinking like Dave. I ended up drinking on my own because I could never get back safely. Every night I was drinking a bottle of vodka, and then I'd go to a fairly respectable job, sort of public relations manager for a local council. I was working in the civil service for a while, drinking a bottle of vodka every night and trying to keep under wraps. The morning, get the 2 litres of coffee, because that would wake me up. I'd buy 2 packets of Airwaves chewing gum because it's really strong. Like, I'd absolutely douse myself in like aftershave because I'm going to stink. And it took me to having a mental breakdown myself to realise, actually, this can't carry on. I was at my wit's end. I was drinking every night, as I said, because A, the behaviour when I was drunk was just atrocious. I was publicly embarrassing myself. And B, I was never making it back from town. I only lived a 10-minute walk. And the amount of times I've just been woken up by tourists in Southend on the high street, because I'm just passed out on the high street against some railings. And in the end, it took me, I broke 5 bones between the ages of 30 and 38, which is when my drinking really accelerated. I don't remember breaking any of them. I almost died from one of them on a mountain on my own at night. I'd fallen down a mountain, went on a skiing holiday, didn't do any skiing because it looked too dangerous, then woke up with a broken leg, broken in 3 places, halfway down a mountain. And what I found though, since the day when I decided it was all enough, which was my rock bottom was I stole some sausages from Lidl. Which compared to some of the other things that happened, that was my last day of drinking was actually just one sausage, a giant novelty sausage.
Giant novelty sausage.
Giant sausage. And I'd gone to Lidl to buy more vodka because obviously I hadn't had enough. I was on a 2-day binge. And I didn't have any problem spending £10 on a bottle of Vicious there, cheap brand vodka. But I didn't want to spend £5 on a sausage, but I did want the sausage. And that was the first time. I hadn't realised I'd done this until I found out the next day. Well, it wasn't the next day, it was 2 days later, because it was the first time in my life where I've had 24 hours that I've been active. I just don't remember an entire day. As far as I was aware, I'd been drinking on a Monday, I'd gone to bed, and I'd woken up on a Tuesday, except for when my memory starts to get me waking up, it was in fact Wednesday. And I've had to have people tell me everything I did on that Tuesday. And I haven't drunk since that day. It took me stealing sausages at Lidl, which I thought, that's not me. And since I was terrified that life would never be good again, because for me, drinking was fun. It was the stuff that got me through. And I didn't want to be boring. I saw, like my boss at the time, his life was always very organised, and I used to sort of kind of resent him, I think. Because he'd say he was going to do something and he'd actually do it. That's something I could never relate to. But what I found out is that sobriety is fun. Maybe not at first, because you have no notion of how to entertain yourself. But then you meet people like Sam, you meet people like Dave, and I've fallen into that trap when I name everyone in the room. But you meet new people and you find new passions. And when you find new passions, you don't need to take the edge off. when you're not drinking every night, you have to deal with your emotions properly, whether they're good or bad. And just before I stopped drinking, I'd had my arm around because I wanted to talk about my mum. Every time I drank, I'd pick this wound and I'd end up crying about it, which is stupid because I was 8 at the time. I was 38 at this point. That's 30 years. And I had that honest conversation with my aunt, and it allowed me to put it to bed. It's like, okay, I haven't got all the answers. My memory of everything that happened, that's my story, but it's also my past. And I stopped drinking, and I was able to actually put that to bed. And since then, I have got a life that is completely different to how I thought it would be, but I love it. I've got lots of challenges because also when I was drinking, it led to me to, when you shut off the rational side of your brain, you do things that sober you would never do. And I've got convictions behind me, which is I've lost my jobs, I've lost marriage, and I've lost everything except for the roof over my head, which I've somehow just about kept. And I'm working on a 0 hours contract at Tilbury Docks, even though I've got 20 years experience like in civil service and local government, and yet I would pick this life today over everything that I had and didn't appreciate before. And I'm going to let you have your buffet. But if anybody is struggling, you've got a room full of people here, slip around you. I think you could ask anyone in this room and you could tell them. And then just by sharing your story, by opening up, having an honest conversation, that one little conversation could lead to you having a life better than you ever imagined. And that will probably look completely different to how you ever imagined too. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone in this room who's been part of my own recovery and part of somebody else's. And go and have some coffee. Especially if you're a man. This is one thing I want to say actually for all the men in the room. Men, it's okay to say to another man, shall we meet for a coffee? They don't do that. I did a poll at work. So if some guy said to you, do you want to fancy meeting up for a coffee, as opposed to you fancy meeting up for a beer, they'd think it was really weird. Possibly a little bit gay. But I know there's men in this room. I could say, do you fancy meeting up for a coffee? It'd be too bloody right. And you know what? You can also have cake. And so, and on that note, I believe there might be both of those products and others downstairs for you now.